Item 13 is regarding City Council Policy A29, compensation plan for executive and unrepresented employees, and the city attorney. I'll ask City Manager Mitchell to tell us about this, please.
Surely, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, in 2016, the governor signed Senate Bill 1438. Essentially, SB 1438 required that city councils receive an oral report from the mayor about executive compensation. The city currently has members of its staff that are not represented by a labor group. It's the executive team and confidential employees. And the purpose of this agenda item is to present that information to the City Council at a public meeting.
All right. So, Council, you have any questions or comments? Ben?
I want to give everybody an opportunity, so I want to defer in an effort to eliminate any conclusion that I'm speaking strictly from political grandstanding or anything. So I just want to give everybody an opportunity to talk, but I do have a few questions.
Does anybody like to speak before Ben? The floor is yours, Ben.
Thanks. I know I'm probably going to offend some people in this room. I assure you that that's not my intention. I want to first say that I'm not against raises, not in principle and arguably not in theory. But what I have an issue with is blocking everybody together and giving everybody raises as opposed to looking at each department, each person, each job scope. And the most important thing is being a student of economics is replaceability. Because we have an opportunity and a responsibility running a city with your money that we have to treat every job differently. Because there are certain jobs when we put out to the public, you get a flood and barrage of people interested in wanting to do the job. And then there are some where I admit it's cheaper to give people raises to keep them on because it costs more money to train. And so I want to lay that out there, that I'm not against raises, but I'm against it being in a block that way. So while there are certainly people who deserve raises, I would argue that some more than others and some none at all. Just like normal people out in the field, out in the workforce and private sector. Now, replaceability is it's a scary word for most people, but we have a responsibility to put that out there. And when an employee of a certain job or a certain position gets too comfortable, in my opinion, it's not good for anybody. So while it's probably not the normal thing you hear at City Council, and some people and staff are probably listening and thinking, well, what does he mean? Again, I say I'm not against raises. That it isn't my position whatsoever. But I do want to look at performance and what it would cost to replace if we need to, because that's what we have to do. Because I want to be as transparent as possible. Let me just put that out there. And I'm concerned, obviously, about either budgets or how we spend our money. And so, when you're listening to me, I want you to know that that's the place where I'm coming from. It isn't anything. It isn't anything political. I could care less about that. What I care about is getting the best person for the job. And if it's easier to get somebody at this price than it is giving raises, then I'm for doing that. I'm for saving as much money as possible because I'm frugal, but I'm also disciplined. So, and if you're listening to this and member of the staff, I might not be talking about you. I'm not talking across the board, but I'm just laying out my concerns. And whether you agree or not, or believe in it or not, I'm going to be here long after everybody's gone. So and I'm concerned about where our money and how our money is spent. This is not from a political standpoint. Again, I reiterate, I could care less. But I just want to say that. So I'm only voting I would only be voting no against this because I want it not in a block. I want it per position, department head, what have you, because that's the school of understanding where I come from. And in my current position, and even in a previous life where I've hired and had people that work under me, dozens and dozens, sometimes 100 at a time, that's what we did. And arguments like it's standard practice or other cities do it, I don't care. We have a unique situation in El Cajon. It's unique. It's not like any other city, and so on and so forth. So that's the position that I want to kind of lay out there and unpack for everybody to know and to understand where I'm coming from. And again, it's probably going to be twisted in some other way. I'm not against raises for the fourth time. So I thank you with that, and if anybody has any questions for me.
I'd like to have Graham maybe comment on the fact that it would be very difficult to go employee by employee. Like if you're running a business and you have 60 employees or 50 employees and you have different managers at different departments and they come in and say, how about, changing this level or something like that. But I don't think that's the case with cities. I think it's a little more as a group type thing, like they have associations and municipalities. If they weren't doing a good job, I'm sure they'd probably be, congratulations, thanks for working for us, goodbye. But I think that staff keeps a pretty good eye, and management keeps a pretty good eye on the management staffs that pretty much they're the ones getting these increases, which are the same as what the other groups got. And so it's a little hard when you have 300 or 400 employees to go around and individually grade each one. Maybe they don't
might
get
be something.
recognized for it. Maybe this is a form of recognition. But and I think another thing too is our city is competing against other cities that if we don't improve our employees' positions, they take off for other cities. And it costs a lot to retrain a person in these supervisory positions. So I'm going to vote yes on this because I think it's in our best interest. We don't want to have a mass exodus.
While I respect Bob, I have to disagree, and I think I already laid out his argument before he said it. He said that other cities do that, it would be hard to do, and we have to reward them. Just because other cities do it, and it's the normal thing to do, normality in government, it gets us in trouble. And that's why, because we're not really good at spending your money. So just because other cities do it, that's probably, that to me becomes a red flag. And I already stated that it's sometimes cheaper to pay raises as opposed to rehiring new staff. But it's all about the demand for positions. So if I was to pose a question as for our vacancy assistant city manager position, we put out obviously a request, and Graham's been trying to get an assistant city manager. Now, clearly, that position would draw in a ton of interest. Over 100 people. Over 100 people. So what that tells me is that that's over 100 people that are interested in doing one job. So while the theory of having an exodus and that scare it's just not real. There are plenty of people that want to work at the city for benefits and a plethora of other reasons. So business as usual, I'm just not in favor of business as usual, as you can probably hear. But supply and demand are important here. And replaceability is also something we have to talk about here. And if you're staff and you're listening to me, I might not be talking about you and your position. This is not across the board. That's why I don't want to generalize. I'm not trying to gloss over anything. This is just specific. And if it's hard to do, whether you have 80 employees or 100 or 300, I'm up to the challenge. Let it be hard. If we can save money and get the best people, let it be hard.
I got a different view on this thing. I don't think we're giving a 2.5% raise to people. I think we're giving a 2.5% raise to the range
within the job classifications shown on here, it's up to the city manager to determine individual compensation. Am I reading that right?
I would treat this more of as a cost of living to the ranges within each position. And if you notice in the attachment, there is. I appreciate Mr. Kalasho's comments about how there is a demand for certain employees that are more difficult than others, and there's a skill level and a management of a few employees versus a management of 100 employees. There is a different compensation.
But the vote today is a 2.5% increase on the range, not to a specific person's compensation.
If someone is in range C, for example, it'll modify the range, but then it'll also be implemented by giving that individual, if they're in step C will now have 2.5% more value.
And that's at your discretion, though. Our vote here today is on the range, correct?
No, it would if they're in step C, I don't have a discretion to withhold a cost of living. They would continue in step C at that 2.5%.
Okay.
So piggybacking off of that was what, I guess, the crust of what I was speaking of, because the person making 200K at 2.5% is a lot different than the person making 46K getting that 2.5%. That's what I want people to understand, right? So there's a difference between an increase of a $5,000 annual to somebody as somebody else getting $500. So again, I just want to leave it at that, right? So that way I unpacked my concerns for everybody, and that's why I'll be voting no for it. But it is in no means a reflection of my stances against raises.
All right. Any more discussion from council, or would someone like to make a motion?
Move to approve the changes to city council policy A29 described below on the attachment, and acknowledge the adjustment to the city manager's compensation in accordance with the terms of the contract.
Second. Moved and seconded, please vote.
Motion carries with a 4-1 vote, with Councilmember Kalasho voting no.